Indiana soybean checkoff dollars support you with many, many, many tools to help you get the most out of your bean. Activate your membership at indianabeanbenefits.com.
Welcome to another Better Farming Report, research-based resources to help you farm more profitably and productively, brought to you by the Hoosier Ag Today and the Purdue Center for Commercial Agriculture. Our reports are sponsored by the Indiana Soybean Checkoff and Indiana Soybean Farmers, and we are on the Throckmorton Farm just south of Lafayette talking about weeds and weed resistance today. With me, Jim Mintert from the Center for Commercial Agriculture and Extension Weed Specialist Bill Johnson. Weed resistance is an issue that we have all heard about, and that more and more producers are facing or managing so that they don't have to face it. So, Jim, when you are making your plans, when you're running your budget, when you're beginning to think about cost of production, managing for weed resistance and the cost of weed resistance on a farming operation for corn or soybeans, certainly an economic factor that needs to be considered and planned for.
Well, very much so. In fact, you think about it, going back a few years, we had a period of time where weed control was, one, pretty simple, and two, on a cost per acre basis, was pretty cheap. Now we've entered an environment where in a majority of the fields in Indiana, we're dealing with a resistant weed species of at least one, maybe several of those. And now we've got to manage accordingly, because the cost of not managing those weed species effectively is tremendous. So if you think about it from a cost per bushel standpoint, look at our budgets. If you reduce yields by 30% because you failed to adequately control weeds and soybeans, you could easily increase your variable cost production in the ballpark of about $3 a bushel. So that's a tremendous increase in cost per unit of output that we simply can't afford in this tight margin environment.
Indeed. And again, more and more weeds are becoming resistant. Close to worldwide, 300 different weed species have some form of resistance. And Bill, it's an issue that farmers have to deal with. They have to face whether they have it or they don't have it. And again, what's probably the most important thing to do, important thing to consider when you're thinking about managing resistant weeds?
Well, I think the first thing for the grower to recognize is whether or not he has a problem. And the big things to look for are whether or not you have live plants next to dead plants that have been sprayed and all the spray application parameters that have been ideal. Whether you're not getting good control of a specific weed species that you've been controlling in the past. So some of those little indicator things that can be pretty subtle at first, but we should really be thinking about resistance and how to manage resistance. From the standpoint of how a guy growing soybeans should be managing his weed problems, if he's growing soybeans and he has mare's tail, he should treat it like it's glyphosate resistant. We may not have glyphosate resistance in every soybean field in Indiana, but at least 70 or 80% of them will have resistance to glyphosate and possibly some resistance to ALS inhibitors as well.
We've got a number of other weeds that are really a problem for growers, and water hemp was a big one last year, again, a lot of because of the moisture issues that we had. But again, there are a number of weeds that you've identified, and that's another factor, is being able to identify the weeds that you have, whether they're resistant or not.
Well, that's correct. For Indiana, I think there's four main weeds that kind of drive our weed control decisions, and one is mare's tail, two is giant ragweed, 3 and 4 would be water hemp or Palmer amaranth, water hemp and Palmer amaranth. Water hemp is more widespread than Palmer amaranth, and water hemp typically does well in years when we have lots of excess rainfall like 2015. The big thing thinking about 2016 in terms of water hemp is the fact that we had a lot of drowned out areas in fields that were not replanted or did not have the water hemp controlled, and so a lot of that water hemp went to seed, so we have a tremendous seed bank that we're dealing with this year. Palmer amaranth, on the other hand, does very well in drouthy conditions, and so if this summer turns off hot and dry, particularly in June, we could see the Palmer amaranth issues being much more significant this year. So those are kind of the four main driver weeds as far as glyphosate resistance. The unfortunate thing is that we're seeing more and more PPO resistance in water hemp and Palmer, And so when we have glyphosate resistance and PPO resistance in these pigweeds, we essentially don't have any post-emerge options in Roundup Ready soybeans. If we're in Liberty Link soybeans, we've got a tool, but if we're in Roundup Ready soybeans, we don't have any post-emerge options.
What are some of the options that growers have? As Jim indicated, it's a tight margin situation. Growers are looking to spend as little money as they can. But again, not addressing weed resistance, as Jim has indicated, is not a decision that you can make economically. What are some of the things that growers need to do from a management standpoint, from a chemical standpoint, to, one, control their weeds, two, to control resistance?
Well, a couple of things. And if your beans haven't emerged from the ground yet, use a residual herbicide that has activity on any of the 4 weeds that I mentioned, and it's going to have residual activity on the other weeds. If your beans have emerged, make sure you spray the post-emerge treatments when they're small. If you think you may have glyphosate resistance, and glyphosate is your primary post-emerge herbicide, make sure that you add another herbicide to that to enhance the activity on that weed. And particularly in fields that have water hemp and palmer, you can put another residual herbicide with your post-emerge treatment to extend that residual window.
What's your recommendation for growers this year, given the fact that we planted relatively early, we've had a mild spring, weather for the summer is yet to be unknown. What's the best management tool that you would recommend for producers that isn't going to cost them a lot of money, but it's going to help them stay on top of the situation?
I think the best thing they can do is take frequent looks at these fields to see what weeds they have, see when they're coming up, how big they're getting, so they can do their post-emerge treatments in a timely manner.
All right. Jim, one of the things that growers want to be able to do is get more information on these issues. And coming up in just a few weeks, one of the best educational tools we have throughout the summer is the Purdue Top Farmer Tour, the Purdue Farm Management Tour. You guys have got a great program put together in parts of Northwest Indiana this year. Tell us about it.
So we'll be having the Purdue Farm Management Tour on June 23 and 24, and as you indicated, it'll be centered in Jasper and Newton County. So we'll have more information available on that on our website. If you go to the Center for Commercial Agriculture's website, you'll see a link with a button on it, so you can actually register and get a little more information. But we'll be visiting several farms in the afternoon of the 23rd, and then pretty much all day on the 24th, and we conclude with a great lunch. That lunch will be held at a farm in Remington. So look to the website for some more details about the tour, but it'll be very informative. Always lots of good information available on the Farm Management Tour.
Alrighty. And again, as we go through the growing season, we will be here with the Better Farming Report to talk about the issues that are impacting U.S. producers as we go through the growing season and provide you with some of the resources to help you, again, produce more profitably as well as productively. Again, the Center for Commercial Agriculture has some great resources online. Hoosier Ag Today will have a number of resources for you as well. We also invite you to sign up for our free Hoosier Ag Today email newsletter. Along with Jim Mintert and Bill Johnson, I'm Gary Truitt at the Throckmorton Farm just south of Purdue. This is Hoosier Ag Today, Indiana's Farm Network.
Indiana soybean checkoff dollars support you with many, many, many tools to help you get the most out of your bean. Activate your membership at indianabeanbenefits.com.